Hi, I'm Patricia Greenberg. My guest today is Sari Botton. Sari Botton is the author of the memoir, And You May Find Yourself. She edited two best-selling anthologies, Goodbye to All That and Never Can Say Goodbye. She publishes Oldster magazine, Memoir Land, and Adventures in Journalism. Sari, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So starting off, I love the title of your online magazine, Oldster. I'm a firm believer in radical acceptance of your age. So tell us about, what does Oldster stand for?
Well, I'm taking a word that had been kind of a slur
Mhm.
and I'm reappropriating it. I'm reclaiming it and I'm using it in a way that is both subversive and tongue-in-cheek. Um, and I'm being playful with it. Some people don't understand that, but most people get it now. That I'm taking a word that we used to use in a negative way and using it positively to describe everyone of every age because we're all the oldest we've ever been, which is a big deal to us.
Yeah, that's so interesting you say that, because I'm sure you're following in the news now. All of a sudden, these terms that we use for aging adults are all banned. There's actually websites that won't let you submit a piece of work if it has the word senior in it, or if it has silver tsunami, which I thought was a brilliant moniker for the age group. And it's turning into everybody's talking about claiming their age and talking about being real, but yet all these terms are not allowed to be used because it indicates somebody's old. So I'm fighting this battle with you, believe me. And I love it. So it's a little play on hipster
Yeah, yeah. And roadster,
and
like
roadster.
those roadster,
Yes.
but also, people used to say, "Oh, he's an oldster. Oh, look at that oldster."
Mhm.
And so I'm saying, the way that the LGBTQ community has reclaimed queer,
Yeah.
I'm saying, you know what? You're going to call us that. I'm going to call us that, and I'm going to say, let's play with it. Let's have fun with this word, and use it how we want to use it.
Amazing. I love it. Now, as you know, oldster connotates the lifestyle of older adults, and yet you interview people of all ages. Tell us how that informs the aging process.
Well, I really didn't want Oldster to be a silo. I didn't want it to be an echo chamber of either only women over 40 or women over 50 or all genders over a certain age, because you don't really get to be heard if you're only heard by, if you're only preaching to the choir. And everyone is going through the experience of getting older and reckoning with their age at every phase of life. The first time I became obsessed with age and aging was when I was 10.
Mm.
And my uncle told me that I was no longer going to be one digit. And it was just this big milestone I didn't even recognize until he said something. And so I really wanted to make it an intergenerational conversation where everyone was hearing everyone else. And the older people were being heard by younger people, and the younger people who are also going through aging and also the oldest they've ever been can interact and be heard by older people. Older people might be interested in knowing, what does it mean to turn 30 today as compared to what it meant to turn 30 when they were that age. And this is part of my mission to um, sort of destigmatize and normalize aging by showing that it's happening to everyone all the time.
Um, you're telling us a little bit about how you came to start this, which is what I was going to ask you. Uh, when you're out, how do you feel you're perceived?
It's interesting, depending on who I'm with, I'm perceived differently, which is true of all of us. Um, I just spent a week in Florida with my mother and her octogenarian friends, and to them, I'm a youngster.
Right.
Um, Although my hair is grayer than a lot of theirs because they color their hair and I don't. I'm 58 and they're in their 80s. And, you know, um, and yet I'm the youngster because chronologically I am. Um, but I'm also from a different demographic. They're fascinated with me. I'm fascinated with them.
Mhm.
But when I'm around younger people, they look up to me. One colleague called me a legend. But then also there are times when I'm with people where we're just being our true essences of ourselves, and age falls away and we just become people, on the journey of life and relating to each other in the most human ways. So it's very variable. Um, I think I'm perceived as young for my age, partly because I don't have children and I've done almost everything in my life, either too early or too late. And I'm just kind of, there's something about me. I have like a youthful essence
Mhm.
that people have
Mhm.
commented on. Um, but I also have severe arthritis.
You have the real this is always the I'm sure you're following some of the science with lifespan versus health span, and where are we at and where do we perceive ourselves. And I just read a very interesting article recently that everyone perceives themselves as younger than they really are, that they perceive themselves as
Interesting.
chronologically younger. And if someone were to ask you and caught you off guard, the tendency is to say on an average 4 years younger. So I thought that was
Interesting.
interesting. We often have to think about how old we are when we get older because time has a different sense of, space and time and feel changes as we age for a variety of reasons. On your Oldster, you have a questionnaire that you put out to midlifers to fill out. How do you choose who to interview and how do people come to you to share their stories?
Well, it's not just midlifers, by the
Right.
way.
Okay.
I have had people who were 29, 30, 40s and all the way up to late 90s. I haven't had anybody over 100 yet.
Yeah.
Um, it's called the Ulster Magazine Questionnaire, and it's basically an interview about what it's like to be exactly your age from a number of angles. And um, most of the people I reach out to, they're people I've heard about or people I know or famous writers.
Mhm.
I've got Cheryl Strayed, and I've had Danny Shapiro, Maggie Smith, um, Liz Gilbert, Lucy Sant, Jerry Saltz. So I reach out to well-known people, but it's a mix. I'd say it's mostly not well-known
Mhm.
people. And people also write to me and say, "Can I take it?" And I will send it to them and say, "Just want to let you know that I don't publish all of them because I publish one a week. That's 52 a year.
Yeah.
And if I published every one that everyone sent me, I'd have to publish three a day for
Yeah. Yeah.
365 days.
Yeah.
People are really interested in this questionnaire and they want to take it. And it's fun. And, I'm working on a proposal for an anthology, an Ulster anthology, and I'm imagining that I will put a questionnaire in there for people to
Mhm.
play with themselves.
That is the thing that, when we look at or ask other people how old they are or how do you do what you do at 40? How do you do what you do at 65? How does somebody 100 run a marathon? Like these outliers and these extreme, people want to know how that happens. And yet the answer is always, well, you have that inside you. Anybody can do it. Anybody can do anything at any age. I'm guilty of that. How do you feel about that?
I don't think that's true. I don't think it's true for everyone. I think we all have I can't run a marathon now. I'm 58. As I said, I have severe arthritis. I
Mhm.
can't do that. I've also injured myself running so many times in my 30s and 40s. So, no, you can't do absolutely anything, but you might be able to do some things that you didn't think you could do because the culture told you can't. And it's worth trying. If it's something that you really, really want to do, I've seen so many people say that they started new careers, new hobbies, new relationships with themselves in their 70s, 80s. And why not? If it's something
Absolutely.
you really want to do, give it a shot and encourage yourself. Don't let the culture tell you you're not allowed to do it because you're too old.
But what are some of the more surprising things that you learn about people over 40, 50, and 60?
The best surprise is when people tell me that their life restarted later in the best possible way. On my 58th birthday last October, I posted an essay of my own with an intro about how I'm afraid to turn 60. I'm
Mhm.
anxious about turning 60. And so many people posted comments about how their life started over after 60 and the best things that have happened to them and the best things they've done occurred after 60. And that was such a great response. I got so many of those responses, and it really told me that I was listening to the culture tell me that getting older is bad. Um, and the truth is, my life is the best it's ever been so far at 58. So who's to, why would I believe that things are only going to get worse? They've so far only gotten better. So that's been really a nice surprise. Also, people talk about sex. And
Mhm.
there are two aspects of sex that I've been hearing, and both of them are encouraging. One is that there are a lot of people having sex a lot longer, and maybe even like becoming sexually actualized in their 70s in a way, they're suddenly free to let go of all the things that they carried with them, and they're having great sex. And then there are a lot of people who are like, you know what? I stopped wanting to have sex, and it freed me up from people pleasing the opposite sex, or, caring too much about how I look. And it's been so freeing because that urge is past. And so it's been nice to hear both of these things. So that's been a really interesting surprise.
I love hearing that because I think it confirms that we don't need any outside validation, and we all wish we knew that at 21, right?
100%. It
I'm
takes a really
60,
long
I'm
time to know that.
63, and I remember I turned 60 during the pandemic. And all of my birthdays, I always say each when I went into the new decade, each birthday was a bummer because I said I didn't do all the things I said I was going to do by the time I'm 50, by the time I'm 40, by the time I'm 30. And I really turned it around. And so I can safely say with 100% confidence, over 60 is amazing. I'm going to tell you, there's
That's good
something
to
about
hear.
crossing that threshold and saying, you know what, 60 used to be, you're totally out to pasture. And if, there's not enough time today to tell you what my friends and family over 60 are doing is astounding. Like you say, writing books, finding new relationships, amazing, because you have the entire total head to toe freedom to do that on every level. I really do believe that. And, as we know, ageism starts in childhood. It's ingrained in us from such an early age. Enjoy it now before you get old, or enjoy your body because you're going to get fat, or all these things we're told, or nobody's going to want you after 40. Crazy, crazy stuff. Do you find that you're seeing evidence of that in your younger contributors?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I had a piece by a writer named Chloe Caldwell. It was a questionnaire. She was 36, and she was talking about two big things that changed for her from 35 to 36. And one was that suddenly she felt invisible. In that 1 year, she went from being someone who was catcalled and given a lot of attention about her beauty and sexuality, and then all of a sudden nobody was doing that. And then the other thing that happened to her was she went from being a regular fertility patient to being a geriatric fertility patient. And I thought that is so interesting. In 1 year in women's lives, that change can happen, and um, you still hear people say, oh, you better get married by the time you're 30. Oh, you better do this by 30. Make this 30 under 30 list or you're done. They're, yeah, from a very young age, oh, you, you're not going to be 18 anymore. You're going into college. You can't get away with this anymore. You can't do that anymore. There's so much of that. It's just crazy.
Yeah, the sentiment that you can only be productive under a certain age, or you can only do certain things under a certain age.
Or be a wonderkind as if that is even
Exactly,
important.
exactly.
Sorry.
Yeah, I participate in a lot of writing groups, and one of the things when Bonnie Garmis's Lessons in Chemistry came out, and the focus on her publishing her first book at 64, and it was on, oh my God, she's 64 and it's the first published book, and she got turned down by 97 publishers. So did 100,000 other friends of mine. 64 is a very prime age to be writing. You have a lifetime of experience
Oh,
behind you.
yeah.
But the focus on her age just wouldn't stop, and I found it very, very annoying because there's so many people that are writing and creating and, taking art classes, like we mentioned, taking sewing, taking up the creative arts is exploding for people, as they age, because it's another way, it's an outlet for you and it's wonderful. So just to keep harping on that is really really horrible. Now tell me, where do you feel you are on the spectrum of aging? I know it's a very personal question, but I'm curious to hear how you feel about that.
Um, I feel middle-aged. I feel I'm at the tall end of middle age.
Mhm.
I'm coming into my third act. Um, but I also feel like I'm one of those women who is perpetually a girl in a good way.
Mhm.
I know there are some women who hate to be called girls.
Mhm.
I don't mind it. I actually just wrote an essay for an anthology that's coming out next year. And the title of my essay is called Naturally a Girl. And it's about how, I guess in my 30s, I came to notice these older women who, no matter how old they are, they have the essence of themselves as girls still very present in them. Patti Smith is one of them.
Yes. Mhm.
Um, uh, Ina May Gaskin, who's like a pioneer in home birth. She's one of these
Okay.
old
Mhm.
women with pigtails, or braids. Um, I saw something in those women back when I was in my 30s that was like, I think that's who I want to be. I think that's who I am. And I think and some of it comes from not having kids, um, and from being a creative person whose life and work are centered on creativity, creative work. Um, I'm also married to a very boyish 62-year-old. He turns 62 today, and he is the world's most boyish glaucoma patient. And, you know, uh, I see that for myself. I see myself as part girl always.
That's wonderful. And when we look around, I always like to discuss ageism and something we do to ourselves. It's something that we unfortunately participate in, is when we look in the mirror and say, wow, do I look old? I'm too old for that. Well, so many of my friends that are still in the workplace are lying about their age. And there's this conundrum of, well, if I tell the truth, my new moniker is, we're here, we're old, get used to it, right? We're here. We are the percentage, are you familiar with the difference between a baby boomer and a Generation Jones? Have you been following that?
Oh, yes, I've written
Yes.
about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Jonathan Pontel, the cultural commentator who kind of coined the term Generation Jones, I'm a Joneser. I was born in 60. And
My husband's a
You're a
Joneser.
Joneser.
I'm the
You're
oldest
you're
Gen
you're
X
the
we can
oldest Gen
be.
X, yeah. And it's we have a completely different view of the world than the boomers. And my husband's a boomer. He was born in 46. So we're molded differently. And what's astounding to me, and Sari, I can't get, I'm trying to wrap my head around this. The Joneses are the most conservative cohort right now in the generations, the living generations. The Joneses voted in Ronald Reagan, both Bushes, and Donald Trump.
That's crazy.
It's
My husband
insane.
is about as liberal as they
Right.
come.
And
Um,
the facts are there, the statistics and the data on who voted. And it's for those of us who are more liberal say, what woman would vote for a man that takes away women's reproductive rights or takes away, but this cohort, And the reason I'm mentioning it is because I really think it plays the role on how one sees oneself as they age. And they feel they didn't have the advantages of the boomers, that the boomers had no choice but to do better than their parents. They came out of the Depression. But the Joneses, we grew up in homes, our parents had jobs, we had a little bit easier as an American, whether immigrant or born in America. And I find that so astounding. And when I did the research, it turns out the Joneses and the Gen X's, the high end of the Gen X's, are the most terrified of aging. This is the cohort that will do anything not to be perceived as old. And so it's a little bit for those of us who are trying to really help people feel good about their lives wherever they are, it presents an interesting challenge. And what I remember growing up, I'll share with you, our mothers dressed like mothers and we dressed like teenagers. Now the mothers are competing with their teenage daughters to see who looks better. So that's like one symptom of this situation. So I think ageism has gotten worse, and I see young people. My daughter, I have a 22-year-old, and her friends are generally lovely to me, but everything's old. I don't want to do that. Only old people do that. Old people do this. That's old. That makes me look old. We used to use the term matronly, right? They have different terminology for it now. But because you hear from younger people, how pervasive is the fear of aging? Tell me what you see. I'm curious what you hear from your variety of people that come to you and share with you what their lives are like.
It's interesting. I was quoted in a New York Times article about Gen Z and their anxiety about getting older.
Mhm.
And the question was, is it worse for them because of TikTok and um, social media and all that? And maybe it's more pronounced for them, but I also think it's the quarter life crisis
Mhm.
um, that I went through and so many people go through because you know, your adolescence, you get a little bit of runway after your adolescence is over into your mid 20s. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I've got to make some big decisions or it's going to be too late. And that's the fallacy. It's never really too late. It helps to make some certain decisions by a certain age
Mhm.
so that you're set up, but you can also change course. It's easier for some people than others, but and then I did a piece in response to that on Oldster called the Quarter Life Crisis, and I asked people to respond. It was an open thread, which means I invite people to
Mhm.
leave comments. It was an open thread about did you have a quarter life crisis or are you having one now? And there were a lot of people in their 20s um, who responded and said, "Thank you for asking this because I'm in this I'm in the thick of this right now, and I am anxious. I'm anxious that I haven't been married yet, and will I ever? And I'm anxious about my career choices. I feel like I made a wrong choice, and now I got to figure out what to do before it's too late." And a number of people wrote in and said, I'm really anxious and
Mhm.
nervous about
Mhm.
my future, and I'm in my 20s. I feel like I'm going to be too old for all the good things soon. And it confirmed what I thought, and it confirmed this idea that ageism affects us at every phase of our lives.
And 30's looming over your head at 25, right? At
Oh
18,
yeah.
it's so far away, but then at 25, 30 starts to feel um, the we're getting near the end, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this geriatric pregnancy. I had a geriatric pregnancy. I was 40 when I had Gabriella, and I was high risk everything, and they were running all these tests. And I finally just said, you know what? Enough is enough. Let's just roll with it. And I had her, and she's fine, and I was fine. And there is some physical ideals about having a child at an earlier age. You bounce back better, and you physically, it's easier to cope when you're 21 with a baby. But the damage it can do in other ways to your psyche and your life of having a child with someone you don't love or someone you feel forced into. Do you hear a lot of that about regrets from women at older ages, older than 30, of course, in their 40s and 50s and 60s, about the regrets about their lives? Is that a prevailing theme?
I mean, I don't know about whether it is related to whether they had children late,
Mhm.
but yeah, people have regrets. People definitely write in about having regrets, and then other commenters come along and say, "Oh, but you can change that." I have
Yeah,
a very, very supportive, active commentariat at Oldster.
yeah.
People comment all the time, and they've become friends with each other, and they support each other, and they say, "Hey, you know what? Try something new. Go ahead and do that thing you've been wanting to do. It's okay, you know." Yeah, there's a lot of that encouragement going on, telling people you're not too old. Do what you want. Try it. It's worth a shot. You still have time. And I
It's
love
so
that. I love that.
encouraging. Absolutely. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
wonderful. Sari, tell us a little bit more about Ulster, where we can find you on Substack.
Yes, it's oldster.substack.com, but you can also get there through oldstermagazine.com. Um,
Ulstermagazine.com. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
Oldster, Oldster. And yeah, that's where to find me.
Lastly, I want to ask you, Sari, what do you like about getting older?
I know myself better, and in knowing myself better, I make better choices for myself,
That's wonderful. That's
including
fabulous to hear.
establishing better boundaries with
Yes.
people
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
myself. Yeah.
And look what you're doing, this wonderful Ulster magazine, which I can't encourage people enough to just go have a look and hopefully join the Substack subscription, because the information is wonderful. And in closing, again, Sari, thank you so much for joining us. And I want to thank all of you for listening to Eat Well, Live Well, Age Well. Please just subscribe to my channel for more information on all things aging well. And for feedback and topic suggestions, you can contact me at patriciagreenberg.com. Sari, thanks you so much again for joining. It's lovely to have you here.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure chatting with you.